First of all, I just want to say welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be speaking today with Reggie Walker. He's the author of Life is Funny, But It Ain't No Joke, A Journey of Awakening Through Wisdom Sayings. And I met Reggie a few times. Most recently, we were together on a 2-day retreat that I led. And in talking during and after the retreat, it was clear that we were inspired by some of the same insights and the same or very similar awakening experiences. And that made me want to speak with Reggie and introduce all of my listeners to him. So first of all, Reggie, thank you so much for getting on.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm very excited about being on with you today.
Me too. So Reggie, I thought before we dive into your book, which is, of course, the main event here, I wanted to see if I could ask you to just introduce yourself, not necessarily spiritually, because we'll talk about that, but just a short introduction so people know, okay, who is Reggie, the guy who wrote this book?
I'm originally from South Philly, for those in the Philadelphia area who have been there. Fifth and Carpenter. It's now, again, called Queen Village, as it's been transformed, to use a gentle term. And I grew up there until I was about 12, and then my family and I moved to what was then called Nicetown, which is in the northern part of the city around Erie Avenue. For those who've been on the subway or rode a bus, you may have seen that avenue. And I was there through, I guess, till I was 21, and I had finished by then 1 or 2 years of college. I initially attended Howard University, and then I transferred for my second year, I think it was, to LaSalle University. And then from there, by now I'm old and tired of school, but I had another opportunity after being down south with the movements, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was a youth group that grew out of Southern Christian Leadership Conference and split off because we were dealing with the identity of people of African descent and the fact that we were not pacifists, per se. So that was a small group that broke off of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee itself. And I was with them for a while. In fact, I went down south and I spent time in Alabama, in Greene County, Alabama, where I was exposed to a lot of raw, very real, vibrant American beliefs and values and behaviors, which were a little disturbing and sobering for me. But then when I returned, I did meet this young man who used to come to a bookstore. I had a bookstore originally on 52nd Street in West Philadelphia, the first one of its kind, an all-African bookstore. That meant African people from all around the world, not just from Africa. We're still Africans. As Malcolm said, if a cat has kittens in the oven, it don't make them biscuits. So we're still African people. We're just here. And I operated in that theater. And from there, my friend, colleague, customer persuaded me to enroll in a program at the University of Pennsylvania that they were looking for students who might apply and resume or begin their university experience, at least to obtain their bachelor's degree. So I did, and I did well. And so I was accepted into Wharton, and I graduated a couple years later. And then I started my travels throughout Western Europe because I'm, I guess what they call biracial now. I don't look like that to most folks. Most folks actually think I'm black, just physically black. And I'm saying, look at me, put your hand next to mine. I'm mixed. Where do you think the mix has come from? And that's the issue we have oppressed, suppressed, and denied in this society. What went on between the races over the 4 centuries. From there, I spent time traveling throughout Western Europe. I went to most of the smaller countries. And then I went into Africa and completed a loop of sorts. So that was an 8-month grand tour. And then I came back. By then, I've been married for several years. Then I came back to my wife and kids and resumed my life. Well, that's not true. I apologize to you, Jeff. While I was traveling throughout Africa, I had an awakening experience in Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. And it was there that I finally experienced my true self. And the higher self, in fact, is no self at all. The lower self is a self because that's who I am running around here with a personality in this body, in this conditioned mind and ego. But the higher self is really no self at all. It's a state of awareness. It's pure consciousness. So I came in touch with that. And the energy of that higher presence, that higher force, connected with my lower self. And out of that grew a number of different things that I didn't even realize that I possessed. As a real teacher, as a spiritual guide, as a healer. And when I mean healer, I don't have a stethoscope running around tapping people in the chest. The work that I do, it always takes the form of healing, liberating, and renewing people. So basically, it's a spiritual healing form. So that's where I am now. And out of that, many years later, the book came through me, as it were, because I would never think, I'll write a book. Nah, not me. I'm still learning the language, so to speak. But the book came out, and there it was. Life is funny, but it ain't no joke. And that's been pretty much where I've been since then, and I've done a number of other things in between. Right now, a little busy for our audience, I would think. But if and when they read the book, they'll get a chance to be exposed more generally to my other endeavors and travels and involvements.
That's fantastic, Reggie. So hearing your story now makes me feel like I would like to ask you one more question before I ask you the questions I thought through about your book, which is, since the last time you and I spoke, which was only 3 or 4 weeks ago, the whole country's been in an upheaval of a fight against racial injustice. And you were part of that many years ago, as you just said. I'm curious about two things. One, how you see what's happening today in comparison to what you were involved with decades ago, and also how you would relate that struggle for social justice to the awakening that your book is about.
I guess when I look at what's going on, I look at it from a place of a global consciousness. I see this whole experience, the eruptions, the asking for breath, is really a reflection of what the planet is saying through us. The living body is Mother Earth, and Mother Earth has given birth to us and all the other life forms that exist from time to time on this planet. And that energy from Mother Earth is speaking through us. And when someone says, I can't breathe, and we say, oh, okay, he's on his neck. Yes, he's on his neck. But it's also a cry from the planet saying the way that we are dealing with things, the earth is suffocating. And if that, which is the source of all life, suffocates, we go with it. We need to be real clear about that. So I can look at the microcosm, but I really like the global perspective. And out of that, Mother Nature is forcing us to become a global community through the virus and other ways, the climate problems and all. Mother Nature says these suckers are so ignorant in denial of who they are and their role on this planet. I'm going to push them before they push everything out the kilter. And we don't even understand the relationship between Earth and the other bodies just in this immediate part of the Milky Way, the solar system that we're part of. And we don't know what imbalancing that may cause throughout this small system, as it were, of planets. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. And then in terms of the social dynamic, which I find interesting. I was talking to my wife, Jerry, who you know, and I was saying, isn't it interesting that this movement was really afoot quite some time? 80% of those who voted for Obama were white folk. 80% of those who voted for Obama were white folk. So there was already an opening of seeing and of feeling and listening, and then acting on the presence of intelligence and character and discipline and a sense of leadership and the responsibilities that go along with that way back then in 2008. And now we're at a place where we have a president who he's going to pay attention, he's going to make America great again despite himself. But it's not going to happen the way he thought it was. But what he's saying is what it is. America will be great again. So he is nothing but the magnet that's drawing out, or the poultice that's drawing out the toxins that exist in our system. He's not creating the damn thing. He's just the focal point of that. And once it's out, like it is now, and we see so many young people in particular involved in this movement, and there's a critical mass now of younger white folks coming out whose parents were involved with the movement in terms of Obama and Michelle, and they have learned in their homes, you know, what kind of society we should have. So they're out there, and it's all on TV. It's always advertising with black. You can't see a commercial on TV without some black folks somewhere in there. So young people are growing up saying, oh, this is how we're supposed to be and how it is. So we have a serious movement going on. When you look back to the 60s, it was very small and it was isolated because there wasn't any social media or anything else of that ilk to carry it, to promote it, and there wasn't really any passion for that. That was like, that's black folks. That's what their problem is. Yeah, they get it or they don't. As long as they don't, you know, cause no problems for me, I'm okay. So the whole consciousness of the world order is changing. We know that what affects one affects another. Mm-hmm. So that's a new awakening in a certain dimension of our total humanity that has been renewed and awakened.
That's beautiful. That's incredibly well said. Thank you. I knew I was putting you on the spot, but I also knew you could handle it. So I guess, you know, diving into your book, and I think a lot of course, as you just said, everything that's in your book relates to everything, including many of the challenges we now face. One of the things I find interesting about your book, of which there are many, is that the book revolves around a spiritual experience which essentially happened in two parts. And one of the things I find interesting is that I've often in my own life, and particularly the spiritual experience that I would say really defined my life, happened in two parts that were separated by a few years. The first was sort of an opening, and then there was a kind of a process of exploring the opening and I think integrating the energies that had come into focus. And then there was a culminating experience that kind of brought it to a close. So I wanted to start with you by asking you to describe a little bit about that initial experience, which, you know, was
Yeah.
was a darker experience and a kind of frightening experience, but a very profound one.
Yes. 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 I think energetically it might be easier for me at this point to just read that. Dying to live. It happened on a fateful fall evening in 1968. I experienced a shift in consciousness / awareness so profound that I have no name for but it, capitalized. I was sitting on our old green couch in the small space that served as both dining and living room in the apartment my wife and I first called home. At some point, I nodded off and slipped into a corner of myself where I had never been. Somehow, I made a breakthrough. I had a breakdown. At the time, I knew not which. I had stumbled beyond the boundary of accepted sanity to a no man's land inside myself and crossed the border of my conditioned mind into a zone forbidden to all except mental and religious authorities anointed by society to reclaim lost souls for its purposes and not for the benefit of those who were troubled or deemed lost. There I sat, frozen inside myself, terrified by an unbearable sound, like the roar of a jet engine that was accompanied by a bright light continuously changing from yellow to green to red and colors I no longer recall. Each time the light changed, a scene from my past clicked into view like a slide in a projector. These familiar images exposed me to a chilling reality I was ill prepared to face. My life was not of my own conscious making. I was forced to come face to face with the reality that I made nothing happen. Everything had happened to me. My life had been unfolding according to the dictates of this thing, this cold, impersonal, unbelievably loud machine with its alternating colored light. While I was asleep, unconscious, this life form had captured my consciousness and was living through me. Because my eyes were open, I was lulled into believing that I was awake. But like a total eclipse of the sun, this dark, unknown presence had blotted out the light of my true nature. Mercifully, I was finally released from the terror inside me. It seemed to last a lifetime, but for all I know, was merely a split second. I tried to convince myself it, capitalized, didn't happen. But from inside, I heard a still small voice that I couldn't ignore. This truth cannot be denied. In a flash, all my cherished beliefs and values, and with them my identity vanished. The compass that had guided me through life was no more. I no longer had any idea who I was, where I was headed, or even the sensation of being alive. I was a shell of my former self, a proverbial dead man walking. Yet, at the time of the death of who I believed, italicized, believed I was, I could only mourn. After all, that self was the only me I knew.
It's a beautiful passage.
Thank you.
So, Reggie, a couple of things are striking me. Have you ever, by chance, read the science fiction author Philip K. Dick?
No.
I'm just realizing, hearing this time, that your experience, especially the machinery, because you describe hearing machinery, you describe lights and images flashing. That sounds so much like his spiritual experience, which was in many ways very similar to yours and equally scary.
Okay.
But tell me, So that's the description you wrote in the book. But what actually happened to you then? What do you think happened to you when you heard that and experienced all that?
Well, I think what happened was I had been digging at things. You know what I call myself just now? I've known it for a while, but the first thing I wanted to be when I was a kid, maybe 12 or 13, was a paleontologist. You know, someone who goes and digs with fossils and puts it together, goes deep into the underground. You know, I mean, it just came to me, and I was like, man, you're a brother, man, and you know, in the hood. Nobody talks like that about no career. And I was like, yeah, well, anyway, I like that idea. But later on, in dealing with this book, I realized that I am a spiritual paleontologist. That's the work that I do, that I go in and dig these things up. So going back pre the initial phase, like you said, there were two phases, two experiences as they were. And I was digging up and challenging everything. I got into Velikovsky, who wrote a book called Earth in Collision, and you know, I was into that. And then I eventually got moved off into unidentified flying objects because I couldn't find an answer here for that power. I knew the power existed because I had seen it in other people. You know, like on TV or in books where they talk about people who can touch something and know about that person, and just levitating, healing people without medical devices and chemicals. So I knew there existed a force somewhere that at least some individuals, fortunately, one would hope, was beneficial, was empowering, that was healing and renewing. And I said, man, I sure like to get at that. So me, as a paleontologist, I continue to dig. And I dug so much that all of my basic beliefs of values and assumptions were overturned. And in doing that, I flipped out of this dimension into some twilight realm, as it were, because I didn't know what it was. And it was there that I saw the imagery that I describe in the book. The mind was a great machine. And when the mind is not directed or guided by a conscious entity, namely oneself, hopefully, rather than everybody else, then when it's not guided that way, it's just it's an information machine. It's a knowledge grabbing machine, but it's not wisdom based. There's a difference between knowledge, which is preparation for wisdom, possibly, and then there's wisdom, the distillation out of knowledge into the deeper knowing of things, just as they are in reality. So I messed around and slipped over into this unknown or twilight zone. And it was there that I had these experiences. And what happened was my ego collapsed. Some people say died. But the ego has a tendency, when you develop a new belief, assumption, thought system, it'll grow back with that. And that's why I guess some traditions always meditate and do things to like in the East, some of them, Buddhists in particular, their goal is to just extinguish the ego. Well, we're in the West, so I don't think we're going to do that right now. But be that as it may, I got caught up into that experience, and I lost my mind. But fortunately, later on, I realized it wasn't my mind anyway, that I was being freed by having this death of the false self. Of course, I didn't know about death of anybody or anything at that point. I just knew that I had been completely traumatized, that I had been stripped of everything that made me a human being. And the experience was so overwhelming that for 2 or 3 or more days, I couldn't stand erect. I was bent over, maybe at a 45-degree angle, or 30, I'm not sure. But that's the way I walked around. I couldn't stand erect. That force was so powerful that it could continue from wherever its source was to direct even my outer self. So that began my journey. I then went, as I say in the book, I went to my mom because my mother she had that psychic gift and she hadn't completely suppressed it, although all of her parents, grandparents, and others, they said, no, that stuff is evil. Because coming out of Africa, Christianized people said everything that wasn't their thing was evil anyway. So you're supposed to suppress that, deny that. But Mom, I'm her son, she couldn't do that. Her spirit wouldn't allow that. So I went to her and she saw an old man, the same thing that happened to Wagner, the great composer. Not Wagner, what's the other one's name? The one who thought he was Superman. I can't think of his name right now. But I don't think it was Wagner. It may have been. It was that presence that had come out. In fact, in some religious orders, they call that old Adam. I think you can even find it somewhere stated in the Bible. There's new Adam and there's old Adam. So old Adam had arisen out of my consciousness because I had opened that portal and didn't recognize what I had done. I was just being curious. I just wanted to know, where's the source of life? Where's the power that comes from that's different than just what happens with the 5 senses and the brain and stuff? Where is that? And here comes this thing. I won't call it a human being. It was just an energy form. And Mom said, as I sat down at the end of the bed, she looked at me, she sat up in the bed and she, scrunched or whatever, twisted her face, and then she said, I see an old man standing over you. He's pressing down on your shoulders. That's why I was bent over. He's trying to take over. Don't let him. Fight him. And my mother never talked about fighting. I mean, she was very genteel from the old South, literally. I mean, she had all of that, in her character and in her ways of, being. But she said, you have to fight him. And that began me really dealing with something that I had stirred up and yet didn't know what it was, but I just knew I had to fight. I couldn't let this force take over. Later on, as I was beginning to research and being guided where I should go to get guidance, get direction, I read something in Carl Jung's book. What did he call it? His autobiography, Reflections, Dreams, and something else.
That's right.
And in it he talked about number 1 and number 2 man. And number 1 is that part of us that lives in the here and now. And number 2 is the unconscious dimension that is always seeking to take over and pull us back to a darker period, to a darker level of consciousness, where it can, in fact, feed off of our energy. Because all of this, everything in the universe is energy anyway. We have been conditioned by the structure of our mind, our consciousness, to see forms, discrete individual forms. But, back in the day when people did LSD, all their forms went away and they just saw streams of energy. So all of this is energy. And that was the energy form that came to attack me and take the energy from me that, I had weakened so much that it realized, hey, it's my body. I can get this one. I can take that. So, I dealt with that.
So tell me, the machine that you woke up to, would you say that was the conditioned mind? That was the sense of self, the ego?
Yes, it's the mind And that's what the parable identity theft talks about. How we are connected to our true self, the spirit, when we come into the world. And we're guided by it if we stay with it, if we can, and we can't. That's why it says you must be born again. That's the way they said it hundreds, thousands of years ago, and it continues to go. I don't think people understand. They think just throw somebody in the water and bring them out and dry them off, and they're good. No, it has to do with the realization that we come into the world and we become entranced and immersed, and have developmental challenges as we come, as babies in this life form. And by the time we're 5 or 10, all that's gone. So for us to reconnect to self, to source, to the divine within, we have to be born again, meaning we have to wake up and realize who we are not, so we can recover who we are in truth. It's a process of remembering. We must remember who we are in truth. But we can't remember until we identify this veil, the external self that is in front of us, that operates and takes charge of our daily lives if we are asleep, if we are unconscious, and or we think that that's who we are, which means we give that form the power of our identity. When we say God out there, the Savior over there, no. That's the power that we have as conscious, sentient beings that we have to use to transform things, to do the work that we came here to do, and to wait based on something out there, the power, when it's not out there like that, it's in you as the one that taps the button, so to speak, that allows you to magnify your energy and your impact in the universe. If we deny that, then we don't assume responsibility for the work we're here to do.
Interesting. So let me ask you another question, Reggie. So you had this experience and you saw this machinery of mind that had basically been running your whole life. You realized you hadn't actually done anything. You had just been doing the bidding of the conditioned mind.
Yeah.
And then you were in this incredibly weakened state, and you were doubled over, and your mother saw this entity trying to take over. Was that entity the mind trying to reclaim you, or was that entity actually something different than the mind?
There's the mind, and its surrogate, the self-made self, which is the ego, or lower self, which is a part of our personality configuration and structure. So it's those elements, and then this form, since it's all energy, it's intertwined. I'm sure there's overlapping and stuff, but I think when you present your present energy form in different conditions and different ways, then different aspects of the energy that has been split off from you as a whole being come into play. Because that's their thing. They'd be like, oh, okay, boom. Somebody else, boom. So it's the splitting off of us. I think the difference is the dramatic splitting off we see as people who have some kind of psychological, emotional disorder. And we call it multiple personality disorder and, all kinds of things related to that. But it's really at the deeper level, there's a fracturing that goes on within our psychic structure. And for some people, it goes so far that they can't come back. They can't reclaim it. They can't be healed from it in this lifetime. And then other people can be healed, are healed, find the way, the path, the door, as it were, and they are saved, as it were. So I think that's what goes on. They're different. The total energy form takes different aspects or different expressions given the condition of each one of us as an entity and an energy form also. If you're weakened, this thing comes up. If you're empowered, something else comes in to support that. And that's why when we do a lot of negative stuff happens to us.
So I'm understanding what you're saying is that that entity that was trying to take over, it was some darker fragment of yourself that had been split off, and now it saw an opportunity to take charge, and it was trying to take over. Understand?
That's what I was trying to say.
Yes, you said it well. Very beautiful. So you survived that attempted overtake, and then you started this journey. And I don't know how many years later, but at some point, and I believe, as you said, it was in Ethiopia, you had the concluding experience, which revolved around, I think, 2 transmissions of wisdom that you received.
Yes.
So I would love for you to tell us about that, because that's, of course, the initial experience was sort of the bad news. And that's right. The bad news came first, and then later the good news came. So tell us about the good news.
Okay. I was like on the, I don't know, let's say the 8th leg of my journey in Africa. I spent the first 2 months in Western Europe. And I guess it really started in the Sudan, the South Sudan. I got on a train in Khartoum, the capital of the south of Sudan. And I just traveled. I was doing all this by myself anyway. I traveled all the way down south and got off the train. I said, okay, this is cool. And I got off there. And it was there that I originally started sensing that there was a reason why I was there. Like, why the hell? Because I was being guided when I was trusting enough to allow myself to be led. Let's be clear. Which wasn't often. It still isn't often for most of us. We still always let the ego and, say, let's do it this way. And then when it don't work, the ego hides out. Say, that's your issue. You deal with that. So anyway, I went down to, yes, that's how it rolls. I went down to South Sudan, and the people that I met, and I met a doctor from Doctors Without Borders. And he stood in the middle of the road in this, it wasn't even a town. It was just a road with a couple buildings on it. And he said to me, I think he was from Northern Europe or something like that. And he said to me, we're very fortunate. We're standing in a time in Africa when the old is passing away, but it is not yet gone. And we are graced by witnessing this. And I guess what came out of that was the realization I was attracted. That's energy attracts energy. Energy attracts energy. Similar energy attracts similar energy on that most basic level. You're being negative, you pull in the negative. You're being positive, you pull in the positive. Well, what I realized is something that, let me find that last sentence if I could. It was there among the Dinka that I witnessed the last generations of those who are sustained by a traditional way of life that is rapidly disappearing from the African scene. Years later, I realized that in some ways, their journey mirrored my own. A passing away of the old without having yet given birth to the new. So that's how that was for me.
So did that initiate the experience that led to the transmissions?
The transmission that took place in Addis. Yeah, I was just had gotten to Addis after a month in South Sudan. And I went to a bookstore. I was in this third-class hotel. And I put my stuff down, went out in the street. I like to do that. And went down the hill and there was a bookstore. They had about 10 books in the whole store, which is not unusual in certain black communities. And one was on African development. It was a penguin book with small print and very boring looking. I said, no, I don't know. But I said, my thing is Africa, though. And then the other one was What Life Should Mean to You by Alfred Adler. And, I knew Adler. He was kind of straight-laced. He was more like Freud. He was a disciple along with Jung. He was more like Freud than Jung was. Jung was spiritual. And Freud told him, don't go messing with that spiritual stuff, man. You're going to open up some stuff, boy, that you don't know how it's going to turn out. So anyway, that's when the split came about. So for some reason, I said, well, let me take this guy's book and read it. So I went up and I read it. And when I finished, I had a urge, a feeling, a movement in my soul, in my spirit, in my being that said, something's getting ready to come through. You need to get ready. I was like, oh, here's that feeling again, because I have had that feeling several times before, but it wasn't like this one in terms of its ultimate expression. So I got a pen and paper, and I sat down on the edge of the bed. And then what I call the Otis transmissions began.
So these are the transmissions that you had in Otis.
Yeah. Your self-revelation and life's work. You are not who society or your friends or your family see you as. You are not who you imagine yourself to be. You are the transformative power of insight. You must stay true to yourself and your calling to help others remember they are spiritual beings clothed in human form. Know that you have all that you need to succeed. Whenever you question the value of your life's work, remember that those who feed others never go hungry. Know that regardless of your past, you are always on your path. Then the second one, I was also challenged to examine several areas of my life where I needed to grow in order to realize a greater measure of my potential. This one is called Life Challenges. Be open to others. Their talents, experience, and goodwill help you to make your way in the world. Stop worrying. As you know from past experience, that nothing is as hard or as bad as it may seem. And that was a big one for me. Still is pretty much, but there it was. Nothing is as hard or as bad as it may seem. Accept that as the final authority in your own life. You are the source of your happiness as well as your pain and suffering. Remember, the power is not only within you, you are that power. Never forget, you only receive what you truly believe you are worthy of. You only receive what you truly believe you are worthy of. All is well. And just like that, the transmission ended. And I'll read this little piece after that. As I sat there that night, looking out at the lights of the Atlas, I suddenly realized I had entered a realm of inner calm and joy, of lightness, and a profound sense of security and love, the likes of which I have never before nor since experienced. Maybe I was feeling loved and protected the whole time I was transcribing, but took no notice until the session's end. In that timeless moment, I was at peace with all of creation and one, capital O, with self, capital S. There were no boundaries. All was formless. There was no more longing, no more fear. I was whole. I was happy. I was free. Surely, if there's a heaven, I've already been there.
That is very beautiful. Very beautiful. So what do you think was happening to you at that time? You know, you had the earlier experience of recognizing the dominance of the conditioned mind over your life. You were liberated from it. You struggled through a battle with some darker fragment of yourself that tried to take control.
Right.
And then you got this transmission and fell into this experience of unity consciousness, which, as you describe it, was heaven on earth. What do you think happened?
What happened is I experienced enlightenment. I experienced that I was one with the source of all life. And that life is the ultimate form of intelligence. And before that, I didn't recognize that. I thought we were the, form of intelligence, and ultimately, no, we are the offspring of that form. That form is not individualized in the way that we think about it. It's the universal self. It's the divine within. It means that force in me is the same force in you. That we are grounded in the same higher consciousness. And it is when we are there that we recognize that we are one and we are one with all of life. And until we make that breakthrough existentially, we never recognize really that all this is energy form and we are one with it. So that's when I started to look at healing. I think that's when that whole passion for healing and renewal and liberating grew in me. And I moved away from simply black consciousness or African nationalism. When I came back here to the States, I changed the whole interior layout of my bookstore from simply being a place of African consciousness and development, which is essential. That was important. Our folks have to go. You have to learn, all of us, to accept your external self and your eternal self from here to eternity. That's the name of that in the wisdom sayings. There's 130 of these in the book, and that's one. From here to eternity, the external self and the eternal self we must embrace. So I was going from the smaller self that really needed a lot of help anyway, despite what the ego was saying, so they could stay in power and run this little game. I needed a lot of help. And when I tapped into the source of all power, all authority, then I was able to, at least for a brief span, feel that total awakening, that total liberation, that consciousness without boundaries, without limitations, without anything that limits its expression but our own state of mind. So that's what it was for me.
And so when you came back, you changed your store. Did you then include more of the eternal wisdom? Is that what?
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. So you were.
I started buying banners from shops in New York that had, the spiritual little banners and stuff, and I started buying stuff like that. And first, people started coming back in the shop because I was the one who was opening the first African bookstore, maybe in the country. In fact, they was like, damn. And I had Malcolm up there. I had Patrice Lumumba. I had, a lot of the icons of our struggle, of our movement. And I had made a transition. I had made a paradigm shift. And now I had all of these things that talked about healing and renewal, but not denial of the African part of yourself, but knowing that that's the external. Everybody has an external essence, being, but your internal, eternal essence is universal. It's the same for everybody. So I started operating on that level. And then the clientele gradually started to change, to soften, to open up, to be more vulnerable, more thoughtful, more reflective. And then I began and I continue to teach. First, I was teaching Black consciousness or African consciousness, and then I started to teach about the divine within ourselves. And because most of us were raised as Christians initially, I would use some sayings or something from the Bible, like, seek ye first the kingdom within, and all things will be added unto you. And I said, this is what you should be learning in the churches, that people should be telling you your power is you. It's within you. It's the universal source of all life and authority. That's what you need to be connected to. And not just to this church, this sect, these beliefs, all of that, And I'm a preacher's son, so I know about it. Like, yeah, whatever. It ain't that kind of party no more on this planet. And that's the transformation, the consciousness that's sweeping. There's a sea change in consciousness on this planet that's sweeping all the life forms in its wake, taking those forms into a whole nother place of expression. And let me say this, please, while I'm thinking about it. Some years ago, I realized there's a saying that Jesus said. He said, you can't put new wine in old wineskins. Well, all he was talking about is all of these new ideas and the power and authority that's coming out of that. You can't keep putting it in that old paradigm, y'all. Wake up. You got to get a new fundamental structure to house and support this. So I'm saying it this way. We're living at a time when the more fundamental aspects of our psyche are erupting, and we have to now open up our minds, open up our consciousness to accommodate it, because it's stronger. It is the force of the universe itself. We have no choice. And that's what Jesus was saying 2,000 years ago. I was like, damn, bro, you're handsome.
That's amazing. So you're essentially saying that, and we started the interview with this, and then we've gone through your experiences and your enlightenment experience, and what you're seeing now is that the racial unrest and the fight for racial justice, even COVID-19, our challenges with climate change, and the many other challenges of polarization. They're all part of one upheaval in consciousness, as you see it.
Yeah.
And this is about consciousness waking up to a new level.
Yep. We chose not to wake up. So the planet said, hello, I got something for you. Bam, because I'm not going out like this with this crazy alienated consciousness that you're walking around on me expression. So you're not willing or able to address this? Here, I'll wake you up. Here's this. You'll wake up or you'll die.
I really feel that too. I feel like there's a movement in consciousness that wants a new possibility for this planet. And it's not going to be denied. Reggie, it's been a total pleasure to talk to you today, to let people know about your experience and your work and your book. And I know that we'll talk again in the future. The book is called Life is Funny, but It Ain't No Joke, A Journey of Awakening Through Wisdom Sayings, and it's by Reggie E. Walker. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.